All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Good morning, and thank you for participating in the joint meeting of Riverside County Habitat Conservation Agency Board of Directors meeting and the Riverside Communities Partnership Project meeting. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order and start off by doing the Pledge of Allegiance. Could everyone stand with me and place your right hand over your heart? Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Thank you so much. Just delaying just a little bit. All right. Janice, could you please conduct a roll call?
Absolutely. When I call your jurisdiction, if you would please state your name. City of Corona.
Tom Richens.
Hemet.
Jackie Peterson.
Lake Elsinore. Menifee.
Lisa Sobek.
Moreno Valley. Murrieta.
Lisa DeForest.
Paris.
Michael Vargas.
Riverside. Temecula.
James Stewart.
Wildemar.
Joseph Morabito.
And County of Riverside.
Ixtine Gutierrez.
Thank you. So that concludes roll call, and we have quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. At this time, members of the public can address the board regarding any items with subject matter jurisdiction of the board that it's not separately listed on the agenda. Members of the public will have an opportunity to speak on agendized items at the time the item is called for discussion. No action may be taken on items not listed on the agenda unless otherwise authorized by law. Whenever possible, lengthy testimony should be presented to the board in writing and only pertinent points presented orally. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and may be acted upon by one motion. The motion to consider any actions by the board or any comments on any of the consent items will be heard. Do any members of the public wish to comment on the consent calendar?
I have no requests.
Thank you so much. If a member of the board would like to request a specific item pulled for discussion from the consent calendar, we will have a discussion and then vote on the consent calendar as a whole to avoid multiple votes. Do any member of the board have any questions regarding the items? Seeing none? Can I get a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar?
Madam Chair, we have staff that would like to pull item 5J.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I forgot that. All right.
Move approval.
Menifee second.
Thank you so much. All right. And then roll call?
Madam Chair, can we do the presentation by staff first?
Sure, we certainly may.
Thank you.
So, staff presentation of item J.
Thank you, Chair. So the California Department of the Water Resources is proposing to implement the Paris Dam Emergency Release Facility project to modify existing release structure and construct a water conveyance facility that would reliably control a reservoir release and convey emergency flows from Lake Paris in the event of emergency drawdown. If an emergency operation was initiated, water would be directed by a levee system across the open SRA land between the dam and Ramona Expressway toward a channel across the southern end of the Lake Paris Fairgrounds and finally conveyed in a channel north of Ramona Expressway to the Paris Valley Channel. So a portion of this project falls within the RCHCA Core Reserve lands. Consistent with the RCHCA as a public project, the proposed project is permitted in a core reserve provided the sponsoring agency mitigates on a one-to-one basis for all SKR-occupied habitat disturbed as a result of the project. So at this current time, the project does not contain any SKR-occupied habitat that will be disturbed. However, in order to be proactive with spatial and temporal changes with nearby SKR populations, DWR purchased approximately 58.86 acres of land adjacent to the SKRHCP, Core Reserve 5 for mitigation in association with the essential dam repair and future activities described in the project. A parcel of this mitigation land was approved by the wildlife agencies for SKR mitigation and includes 10.18 acres of suitable habitat for SKR. This land was set aside to mitigate for impacts associated with the implementation and proposed project if needed. So staff is recommending the board to approve their mitigation strategy for the Paris Dam Emergency Release Facility Project and to authorize the general manager to execute and sign the certificate of inclusion in the event that one is needed. The COI is a vehicle for issuing take authorization for all segments of the project. And this authorization will prevent unnecessary future delays to the project. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you so much for your report. Do I have any questions or comments from?
Quick question.
Yes.
So are we planning to move some of the SKR that were there somewhere else?
So there currently is no SKR in the project area. What the purpose of this is in case they do move. So they did a survey, I believe, in 2012, and they found some nearby SKR population not in the project footprint. So in the event that the SKR do move into the project footprint, this is why they're requesting the approval of their mitigation strategy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that question. Any other questions from, seeing none? Let's move to a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar.
So I believe I heard a motion by Temecula and a second by Menifee. Was that correct? Okay, Madam Chair, since everybody's here in person, you can vote by all those, in favor, say aye.
Oh, that's right, we have a okay, so let's start, will you call the roll call vote for me?
Well, would you
Or
like?
all those in favor?
Yes, ma'am.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Seeing motion passes unanimously. All right, thank you so much. Moving on to a summary of, let's see. Sorry, we're moving on to reports and discussion. Members of the public have an opportunity to speak on agendized items at the time the item is called for discussion. So approval of the fiscal year 2023-2024 agency budget.
Thank you again, Chair. So for fiscal year 23-24, RCHCA is proposing a conservative budget to reduce expenditures since mitigation fee revenue has been down for the past 3 quarters. However, interest rates are higher than expected and constitute approximately 20% of the agency's revenue. Staff anticipate that this will continue through the next fiscal year. RCHCA is continuing to work to establish a public access plan for the Steel Peak Reserve. However, construction is not anticipated for fiscal year 23-24, while RCHCA awaits concurrence from the wildlife agencies. Therefore, is not planning to receive the entire $600,000 grant from the California Natural Resources Agency. A total of $100,000 has been included in the annual budget in the event that staff can move forward and obtain bids for construction. Staff continue to implement the SKR range-wide management and monitoring plan. However, option year 2 and 3 funding was not received as anticipated from the Bureau of Land Management for this implementation due to the lack of government funding availability. This resulted in a loss of anticipated revenue of last year's and next year's budget of $380,000. Due to this, staff have reduced expected contract expenditures with Conservation Biology Institute from $143,000 to $75,000 for option year 3 of their contract. Additionally, staff are anticipating contracting with the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance for genetics research and have allotted $50,000 in the budget for this. Revenue for the general fund is projected to be approximately $1.2 million against expenditures of $1.2 million. For the Lake Matthews Reserve Office, the office is at the end of its useful life, and staff are recommending exploring options to replace the current office. While this was budgeted for in the 22-23 fiscal year budget, the agency was not able to move forward with this transaction. Therefore, RCHCA is anticipating a request for proposal and design consulting research for a replacement reserve office in the 23-24 fiscal year budget in the amount of $10,000. Revenue and fund balance drawdown is projected to be approximately $443,000 against expenditures of $443,000 in the Lake Matthews budget. So overall, staff are presenting a total agency budget of approximately $1.67 million in revenues against $1.67 million in expenditures, with an overall decrease of about 1% of expenditures from the past fiscal year. And that concludes my report.
Thank you so much, Rihanna. Any members of the public have any questions or comments?
I have no requests.
Thank you so much. Do any members of the board have any questions or comments?
Menifee I have a question.
All right.
So in the budget, you mentioned about the Lake Matthews Reserve Office. What are you going to be able to do for $10,000?
That's just to obtain a consultant for design, so we can get an estimate of how much it would cost to replace the office, or if we can just repair it.
Okay, and does this have to do with the budget item? Is the sale of the property, that amount is, I'm trying to remember if that amount, the what is it, 1.8 million, is that going to be put in the 2023-24 budget? I thought I read something about it being put in the 22-23 budget.
For the surplus land sale, is
Yes.
what we're referring to? So that was included in this fiscal year's budget. However, it does roll over into the Lake Matthews budget. So it is there if we need it. It goes into the endowment fund.
Okay, so when you say it goes in the endowment fund, can you just explain to me a little bit?
Sure, the general operations budget and the Lake Matthews budget are separate. So the Lake Matthews has a wasting endowment that we use to support Lake Matthews staff, anything that's related to Lake Matthews. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Menifee. Any other questions or comments?
Okay, you just brought up something that I found very interesting. So what is this endowment and where did it come from?
The original endowments were set up when the RCPP was created to support management and monitoring activities for the RCHCA.
Who was it set up by, though? I mean, because all I know about endowments is somebody rich creates an endowment that funds something. So who funded this endowment?
Yeah.
The HDP required us to set up any endowments, and so we took fee revenue over the years and put it into separate funds within the RCHCA on specific reserves to support ongoing land management and monitoring of SKR within those reserve systems. The reserves actually most of the reserves are multi-species in nature, but we wanted to guarantee that SKR are managed and monitored in the future. So the HDP required that, and the RCHCA set those up probably in the inception, 1996 or so.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Any other questions, comments? All right, seeing none, can I get a motion and a second?
Move approval.
Thank you, Temecula. Thank you, Paris. And all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Not an opposing group today, so wonderful. All right. Status update on Stevens Kangaroo Rat recovery effort. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, this is just a brief update on the ongoing recovery efforts.
Brian, can you turn on your mic, please?
I
Thank you.
apologize, I didn't hit the button. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick update on the ongoing range-wide monitoring program. As you know, last fall, we began collecting for the first time in our agency's history, and the first time really since the listing of SKR in 1998, we did a range-wide analysis of where these little critters are located, and we performed 76 random sample cells throughout the historic range. The USGS did another, I believe it was 10 or 12 samples at Camp Pendleton along the coastal population down in San Diego. So combined, we had about 88, 90 different sample sites, really a first of its kind. In 2023 is going to be the second year. This really provides us with that second data point. And so another 76 sample cells will be surveyed by the RCHCA. And in order to speed up the process a little bit, we really need to know where they're at and basically what the population is doing. And so we want to repeat 50 of those original 76, and we're going to add another 26 new sites onto that. So we're continuing to expand our map and our knowledge basis of where these things are found, and yet we can have those 50 repeat samples so we can start to see the population trends. And just to forewarn you, just to lower your expectations, we had a really good last year. The population was doing really well. We expect with all the rain and all the vegetation growth, the population naturally declines when there's a lot of vegetation cover. They're actually a lot harder to find, as you can imagine, when you're wading through 3 feet of invasive grasses and mustard. So expect to find that the population declines. We expect that, we anticipate that, but we're going to kind of hopefully diminish that short-term noise and look at the long-term trends in population. So the population is going to fluctuate from year to year quite drastically, but hopefully in the long term it stabilizes or improves as management and monitoring takes place. So it helps with the statistics. It'll help speed things up and hopefully speed up the recovery efforts moving forward. In addition to that, we're proposing in our budget that was just approved, thank you, to work with the San Diego Zoo's Wildlife Alliance. In the past, we have worked with them quite successfully over the years to develop a translocation project. We anticipated years ago that some of these reserves are going to become islands. We're going to develop all around it. There's not a lot of linkages in there. And so if you have a lot of islands, you have the possibility of inbreeding within certain populations. When you have these natural crashes in populations like SKR, there's less of them, there's a high probability of inbreeding over the years. In order to do that, in order to see that before the population actually crashes, for instance, you could maybe see if it had a kink in its tail, that there's something going on there, but inbreeding doesn't show up necessarily like that. It could be an enlarged liver, reduced kidney function, that kind of thing. You'd never see that by just handling it. And so what we're proposing to do is start collecting genetic samples. We did this about 12 years ago to develop a really rough, coarse kind of understanding of the range-wide genetics. Was it all one population from the 91 freeway down to northern San Diego, or were there separate populations? And you have to kind of be concerned about that if you're going to start moving them around. If there's slight genetic differences, you can't move those populations together. And so we took we actually snipped their ears back then. This was kind of a crude way of doing it. I took specialized training, and unfortunately, now we know better, and we don't have to do that kind of invasive kind of tissue sampling. But we are proposing to pull hairs. So if we pull the hairs, we get the follicle, we can analyze the genetics that way. Unfortunately, our old protocol using tissue samples, ear samples, doesn't quite jive with actually pulling the hair and using the hair follicles. So we have to develop a new protocol. And so we're asking you in our budget when you approved the use of about $50,000 to develop this protocol in a cooperation with the San Diego Zoo's Wildlife Alliance. That will basically tell us, before we see a population decline, we'll start seeing genetic variation within the population, and we'll know that population either needs additional monitoring, or maybe we have to translocate a few SKR into that population to augment the genetics and prevent that inbreeding from happening because of the fragmentation of the habitat. So it's kind of like the canary in the coal mine. It'll be the first thing we notice before the population actually declines. Oftentimes in years past, you see this happen all the time in endangered species. It gets so low before the population gets so low before anything can be done. And at that point, you're talking 50 condors in the world, and you're trying to bring that population back up. We don't want to have to do that. So the hair samples will be quick, easy. It's easy for anybody to do. If we have to contract with additional labor to do monitoring in the future, it's easy to train somebody just to pull a couple hairs out of the base of their tail rather than trying to snip tissue off of their ears. So that's basically where we're at. Stay tuned. By the next meeting, we should have some preliminary data. That'll give us 2 points. We really need that third year to start seeing the trend line. We suspect that first dot from last year, maybe a reduced dot this year down on the graph. But we suspect over the long term, that population will continue to increase as it has over the past 25 years. So I'll be happy to take any questions, and that is a receive and file. Oh, I'm sorry. There is a map. This is where we're going if you're interested. The green dots are the new sites. The red dots are the existing sites. So you'll see we're basically hitting all the similar areas as last year. But that is receive and file. I'll take any questions if you have any.
Thank you so much. Any members of the public have any questions or comments?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Any board members have any questions or comments? I'd just like to say thank you for pulling the hair instead of snipping the ears. Yeah, so for humanitarian reasons for our little friend, so
We've
thank you.
evolved.
Yes. All right, thank you so much, and that will be received and filed. So thank you. All right. Stevens Kangaroo Reserve Management and Monitoring Efforts Activities Update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 6C is just an update on reserve management and monitoring. And we'll start off here that we want to say it was a busy year this year. We got a good amount of rain, and when I say a good amount, we got just a little bit over average. At the Lake Matthews Reserve, we got 15.3 inches. Our average is 14.4. The issue is that we don't typically get our average rainfall anymore. So when we get just barely an inch over, it seems like a whole lot. So that was kind of a blessing and a curse at the same time. A blessing, and you see these images here that we have. We have a good bloom. We had a really good bloom of our native species. We had a good wildflower display this year, not kind of 2018 levels, but still is really good. Some of our restoration sites that we've talked about here in the past, we do the restoration by broadcast seeding. They worked out really well. In fact, the picture in the center there is actually a site that was seeded earlier in the year in about December or January, and it already bloomed and took off like you see there in that photo. So it was a really great year for that. Everything took off. Other restorations or repairing restorations look really good as well. So it benefits not only SKR, but other species in the area as well that are kind of rare or have a special status as well. One thing about the rain, though, this year is that it was a little bit unique in that in Southern California, we usually get some large storm events. They deposit a lot of water, and then they kind of move on. And that's pretty much all the rain that we get for the year. But if you look at the graphs for the weather during this winter and spring, you'll see that the rain was kind of evenly distributed out amongst all those months. So going back to November, all the way up to about April, you get a really consistent rainfall. And that's where that kind of becomes problematic for us, because if you could imagine, it's like constantly watering your lawn at home and not doing anything about it. You just add water and add water and add water. It keeps growing. And you can see from these pictures here, we had a lot of stuff come up. So not only is it good for the native species out here, but it was also a really good, well, I should say, really bad year for invasive species as well. So this is kind of problematic for us because SKR, the Stevens kangaroo rat, and other species that rely upon the grassland habitats have very kind of specific requirements. Stevens kangaroo rat in particular likes, they don't like the really tall grass. They like more shorter kind of forbs with flowers, and they need about 50% cover from vegetation and about 50% bare soil as well. So we have to combat that, and we spent a good amount of effort this year combating that. Thankfully, we have the sheep out there grazing. They grazed a little bit over 2,000 acres this year of our grassland habitat, so that was a really big help from them. Our staff has also been carrying out mowing to try to reduce the grasses and reduce the seed that the grass produces. And we've also done some herbicide applications as well. And not only is it grasses, but I know you heard me talk about other species that are problematic for us, stinknut. We have a lot of mustard and some thistles that come up. So just this last year between November and May, we treated 115% more acres than we do typically on average. So we've more than doubled our effort this year in management. So hats off to our open space habitat technicians that couldn't be with us here today. But every day for the last few months, they put in an amazing effort. It was nonstop this year. We started treating for invasive species in November, and we just probably stopped this week. This week was the first, essentially, switch in duties that we have to do, and we have to consider that we also have other duties. We have contracts that we have to maintain with the Metropolitan Water District. So weed control is not just the only thing we do, but it was a major, major effort this year. So that kind of summarizes our management activities for this session or for this reporting period. So I'll move on to our biological monitoring as well. So one of the benefits of having all this rain is that we get to see some unique things that we don't typically see. Not only do we manage for SKR out there, but we also kind of take the holistic approach, knowing that our lands are important for conservation in the region. And this year with the rain, we had our temporary pools fill up, or kind of vernal pools. We have one vernal pool in the reserve, and this year we identified 11 pools within the Lake Matthews Estelle Mountain Reserve. And these are very unique in that they don't show up too often. When they show up, they're some of the most sensitive and rare habitat types that we have in Southern California. And some of those species that inhabit those pools as well are pretty unique. One of them is the spadefoot toad. So 10 of our 11 pools were found to have the western spadefoot toad. The western spadefoot toad is a species listed under the Lake Matthews Habitat Conservation Plan, the Western Riverside County Multiple Species Habitat Conservation Plan, and it's also currently being considered for listing as an endangered species under the Federal Endangered Species Act. So it's quite rare, quite unique. They have an interesting life cycle. They live on land most of their lives. When you do get these weather events that these pools develop, they'll congregate there, reproduce, and then they usually need about 30 days to get out of these pools. Although some observations that have been published say that they could carry out their complete development cycle in about 11 days. So that means going from egg until the time that they hop out and are able to live on their own in just 11 days. And that's because of the unique nature of these pools that we have out here. So we were happy to see, when we were not doing our weed control, we were happy to see that we have this habitat here that's regionally significant as well in our reserve system. And it's kind of an attribute or a result of all the management that we do out there that could support this type of habitat. Other monitoring efforts that we've been doing, again, is for another regionally significant species, is a California gnatcatcher, a bird that lives in our coastal sage scrub habitat. We're currently doing a survey for the Southern California Metropolitan Water District under contract. We're just checking out areas that we haven't surveyed or that haven't been surveyed in about 25 years to check the status of that species and make sure that we're good, and ensuring that our management activities are focused in the right direction. So we have to take an inventory of that as well. So overall, a really good year. Water-wise, again, it helped. It hurt in some ways, but we did get to see some things that we haven't seen in a while, not only these pools, but other plant species as well. That is a summary of our biological surveys. So just a couple other things here. We did have the opportunity to have some really good volunteer events. One of them was a local Eagle Scout from Troop 523 out in Corona. He worked with Brian. He wanted to do a project to help us out. So he came out with his troop and installed some artificial burrows for burrowing owls. And this is a great help. The Western Riverside County Multiple Species Habitat Conservation Plan requires that we have a certain number of owls in our region. The Lake Matthews Estelle Mountain Reserve is one of 5 core reserves that that plan specifies has to be occupied by this species. So we try to manage for that species as well. As long as we do good for one species, our management usually kind of helps out other species as well. So this is one of those important ones out there. Hats off to those guys as well. This is some really tough material to dig through. You have to get those boxes pretty low in the ground. There's a lot of rock out there. The parents were out there really digging and helping out too. So really happy about that. And we got to help an Eagle Scout achieve his objectives as well. So that was really helpful for all of us. One more thing here. Another volunteer event that we had is to celebrate Earth Day. So we had about 30 volunteers come out from the community. We had a few organizations out there as well, the Sierra Club, the California Conservation Corps, and Waste Management, Inc. as well had some folks out there, and along with some RCHCA staff and their family were there. And we have this kind of problematic area around the Lake Matthews Reserve. It's on the way to the El Sobrante landfill, and I guess some folks just find it easier to not pay their fees and dump right there in our reserve. So we got together this group, and real quickly in a couple hours on a Saturday morning, we collected about 80 cubic yards of material that you see there, kind of household waste out there. So it was a really great effort. It was kind of fun to spend a Saturday morning out with everybody. Thanks to, again, Waste Management, Inc. Not only did they provide folks to come out and help out, but they also provided the use of the dumpsters. Riverside County Department of Waste Resources helped with the tipping fees. Southern California Metropolitan Water District also helped with some logistics as well. And I guess I got a shout out to the Riverside County Sheriff Office too. We have a new Sheriff's Office down at the Lake Matthews substation, and they have really taken an interest in protecting the lands around Lake Matthews. Some of their management staff has come out and met with us a couple times. So we're hoping to keep this area clean, and they've really been helping out with some of the illegal activities that go on there. And so we're really looking forward to making this a safer and nicer environment, not only for the species that use the reserve, but also for our neighbors that have to drive by and see this all the time. that is my report. It is a receive and file, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any out there.
Thank you so much, Harry. Any members of the public have any questions or comments?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Any members have any questions or comments? Yes.
So you speak of encouraging burrowing owls to live there. How are they encouraged?
Essentially, we provide the housing for them. It's getting them over the hump, essentially. They don't find a real good place to live, and you find them in odd places when they're not in a reserve system. For some reason, you'll find them in some places where you just don't think they would be. So this artificial burrow is kind of, we're providing housing. It's turnkey, essentially. All they got to do is move in. No strings attached, no applications.
Good stuff. The other comment I have is just about the illegal dumping, because, and it seems to be everywhere. I've seen it, whether it's San Diego, our area. I don't know what the answer is, but it'd be great if some of the people up in Sacramento put some effort into that, because I don't remember that being such a pronounced problem when I was growing up. Maybe I was just a kid and I didn't pay attention, but
Right.
it'd really be great.
Yeah, and I think I've said it here before. Our land is nice and secluded away from areas and relatively close to still centers of population, so they're kind of prone to that kind of activity. But again, I'm really thankful to the sheriff, who has been taking a really great interest recently in helping us out with that kind of stuff.
Any other questions? Menifee?
Well, first of all, thank you, Harry, for that report. It's very informative, and to see the work that's been going on and with the water and the weather that we had this last year. And I appreciate that you took advantage of Earth Day and did a project out there. My question is on the invasive species. We have talked for several years about the stinkweed, and I will tell you this year, I see it everywhere. And so what are we concerned about it anymore? Are you just concerned about it in the reserve? I'm sure it got spread over Riverside County through the utility companies, because that's where I see it along the freeways, and now it's in neighborhoods, it's in yards. Are we still concerned with that in the reserve only, or throughout the county? And if so, are we doing any public announcements to educate the community to try to, what the stinkweed is and when's the time to get rid of it before it spreads? Because I know the little yellow tops, I think when they dry out, that's when the seeds spread. So anyway, so that's my question on the stinkweed.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure Brian will chime in too. This is a daily kind of topic, conversation topic here, and yes, it is still a great concern to us. We do have the information from the University of California, Riverside, saying that the Stevens kangaroo rat will consume stinknet, but as a last resort. And stinknet does have the tendency, well, it does create a monoculture, meaning that it will completely take over an area, as we now see. Particularly in the Paris Valley, it is completely taken over in some locations. One of our reserves is now reporting about 90% cover by that species. So we are very concerned. We are working with various entities, mostly UCR, to try to figure out a formula. And this year, I could honestly say we gave it our absolute best. We doubled our efforts. The Southern California Metropolitan Water District allowed us to move some funds around in our contract to also help out with that. In the past, we have tried to spread the word out. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, I know, published some documents on it. I know that Brian has spoken to the Public Works Committee as well. We just, the common thought right now is that it's not affecting us financially or the region financially because it's not affecting crops. So there is no big motivation, there is no big carrot out there to make a kind of regional change. And the genie may have gotten out of the bottle this year regionally. We keep talking about that, and this may have been the year where everything is finally out of control. We will still work within the reserve system, not only at the Lake Matthews Reserve and lands that the RCHCA controls, but we'll also work with our partner agencies, Riverside County Parks, State of California, all our members, to try to combat it, but we really do need, we need something. We need a tool that we have yet to kind of discover.
So in the meantime, can we, as board members, maybe we can do like a little PowerPoint picture slide, flyer electronically, war on stinkweed, because what I'm seeing, I can share that in my community. We can get that information out through our community newsletter or whatever, because I'm seeing people thinking it's a beautiful plant and they're pulling all the weeds around it, and I've seen it in HOAs and they're preserving it, right? And so we have so many HOAs in our city that we could get that word out through their newsletters if maybe I had something to be able to give them through electronic. So could I request that maybe there's something that we can receive that could be easy to share?
We do have a brochure, so I will share that with all the board members.
But maybe just even simpler, just like a war on stinkweed and explain blah, 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 evasive or whatever we can do. So we can do our own. We can do our parts in our own cities, those of us who are on the board at least.
I was going to say, we can take a look at our brochure and simplify it even more, so it's a really succinct message.
Okay.
We would ask for your help, your members, and go out to your cities. It really is a public works thing as far as spreading is concerned. I was really happy to see from my commute along the I-15, Caltrans had sprayed. You don't see it much on the side of the 15 this year. Up Lake Street, Lake Elsinore has sprayed, where it used to be along the Albert Hill community there. It's no longer there. So there are some things being done. We just had a symposium with StinkNet. UC Cooperative Extension is now raising to the conservation community. In Phoenix, Arizona was on there. I mean, it's a southwestern problem. And so it is being elevated within our conservation community. But I agree, I don't think it's elevated enough. We initially met with public works departments in this a few years ago, but maybe we let that kind of trail off. And maybe we have to redouble our outreach to the cities, to the public works departments, in order to put that, at least contain it. I don't think as Harry said, 2018, I think it got distributed, but we really kind of lost control in 2023. It got spread far and wide, but it wasn't in these large population stands. And now we just see it where it was 1 or 2 plants. It's now a big polygon of StinkNet. So we need your help, and we need the cities and the counties and everybody to take part in it. And I don't think the word's out there, but we'll definitely take a look at our existing brochure and send it out to you guys. And if you feel like sharing it with HOAs or
yes, thank
councils,
you. And
that'd be great.
I think along the 215, we may have a different Caltrans division because it's everywhere along the 215. So anyway, thank you for that. I did want to ask about the StinkNet. It was a big concern seeing how much it spread over the southwest Riverside County this year. So
it continues to be a concern. It's even a bigger concern, to be quite honest. When Harry said he 115% more work this year, that was StinkNet. They were out there, and hopefully it's a unique year. We got some really good rain in October, November. We've seen StinkNet and other poppies blooming in November and December, which was really an odd year. Hopefully in the years to come, it's, we can use the rain, but, let's have a normal rain year, start in January. It won't be such a huge effort. We won't have such multiple germinations of StinkNet. What happened was there's StinkNet being germinated in November, and then you had more rain, and then it just kept germinating and germinating. So you had some flowering in December, and some that are just flowering now. So you had to just 6-month battle. And as much effort as they put in, and our field crew was tremendous. I can't give them enough credit. But you go out there now, and it's still pretty widespread. If we couldn't keep up with it, a lot of the other reserves I know couldn't keep up with it. And I know if it's not on your radars at the cities and the homeowners association, nobody was keeping up with it as much as we have. And so it got away from us a little bit. But yeah, we'll definitely try to raise the bar and spread the word.
thank you so much.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, that's a receive and file. Moving on to item 6D, presentation by RCHCA's Rihanna Fisher on activities regarding RCHCA's educational outreach program.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Slide. There we go. Okay, in October and November of 2022, RCHCA resumed its educational outreach program, which was on hold for COVID. So it's called Celebrating Endangered Species Day. We hosted over 200 fifth graders from Hemet and Parasite Unified School Districts. The event was held at the Southwest Multi-Species Reserve and for the first time at our Lake Matthews Reserve. As a follow-up and additional opportunity for learning, our CHCA provides art paper to the teachers, and students are asked to illustrate what the topic means to them based on their day at the reserve. The students are encouraged to be creative and expressive with their drawings. All students receive an award for participation. In addition, we provide special awards to those students at each school whose artwork really captures the theme and meaning of the event. We narrowed the awards down to grand prize, runner-up, most original, and most creative. And just here's some photos from our Good Hope Elementary School in Paris. And then we also, this is the Eagle Award that we provide the students who win the awards. So staff from WRCOG judged the artwork and selected which students would receive the award. The awards were presented at each school in April. So we are planning to hold this year's events again in October and November, and we'll select different schools to participate. And that concludes my report. This is a receive and file. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Rihanna. Any members of the public have any questions or comments?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Any board members have any questions or comments? All right, let's receive and file. And moving on, item 6E, presentation by Brian Schommel regarding the deposition and sale of surplus lands. Thank you so much.
Brian, your mic, please.
Mike.
I'm loud, I'm sure you probably heard. But anyway, I'll turn it on. As you guys are aware, we have 8 surplus parcels we discussed before. About a year ago, we talked about we were approached by Ecosystem Investment Partners to, if we were interested in selling our Nuevo, 3 parcels near Nuevo, unincorporated city of Nuevo. And during the last year, we went out to a notice of availability through a course of negotiations with 3 interested parties. EIP was the sole remaining party. The board accepted their offer. We went through with the sale on April 21st, 2023. We closed escrow and we received $1.8 million, which was a great asset to have, and will continue to fund certain specific one-time projects moving forward. We would like to thank Ecosystem Investment Partners for such a smooth transaction. In our history, we never got rid of any kind of land, and so staff was relatively new at this. We really want to thank the subcommittee as well, the RCHCA subcommittee, for guiding us through that. And Ecosystem Investment Partners was very helpful from all aspects of it. And so we're appreciative of it, and we will hopefully put that 1.86 million revenue to good work, to good use, moving forward with SKR management and monitoring and help recover the species. But that concludes the presentation. It's a receive and file, and I'll be happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you so much, Brian. Any members of the public have any questions or comments?
No, ma'am.
All right, any member of this board have questions or comments? Yes, Temecula.
Okay, so that's your statement that it's unusual to sell property. It's true. So why were we disposing of it, and what is the new owners doing with it?
So why are we disposing of it?
Mike.
Your mic.
Sorry about that. Why are we disposing of it? So originally when the RCHCA was adopted in 1996, we really didn't have an idea of where SKR were located. So the previous director was instructed to buy land that we thought may have SKR on it. And if you go into our history, the RCHCA was really supposed to consolidate a lot of conserved land at Lake Matthews. It was supposed to be turned over to the Bureau of Land Management to be managed in perpetuity. The Bureau of Land Management backed out a number of years ago for a variety of reasons. We got basically stuck holding the land at Lake Matthews, and so we had to manage and monitor it. These other parcels were always supposed to be sold once we kind of reconciled what land we needed. It was supposed to be sold, and then that funding was going to be used to fund additional purchases or acquisitions of property. However, after it was all said and done, we had these 8 parcels. Nobody was interested. They're really undevelopable. For instance, these 3 parcels in Nuevo are completely within a FEMA flood zone. They have MSHCP requirements for conservation on them. There's about 6 acres in there that potentially could be developed. Other than that, they're earmarked for conservation under the Western Riverside MSHCP. The second part of your question, what is happening to them now? So Ecosystem Investment Partners already has about 75 acres out there and they formed a mitigation bank with that. And so these lands are going to be added to their River Park Mitigation Bank. Regional infrastructure, regional development projects who impact riparian habitats need to buy credit because there has to be no net loss of wetlands. So they can go out to that mitigation bank for a certain amount of money, pay, get some credits, and then they can impact riparian habitat within their development or within regional infrastructure projects. So it's a regional benefit. There's also some MSHCP benefit. The RCA, the Regional Conservation Authority, has a conservation easement over the River Park Mitigation Bank. And so the RCA gets credit for the special species that inhabit that area, like San Jacinto crown scale and this other plant and stuff. So they can get credit towards the MSHCP goals and objectives as well.
So how many acres total did we just dispose of?
Was it 74? 74 acres, I believe.
And was it almost all riparian?
It's now kind of ag land. It was historically riparian. So that floodplain, it's right along the San Jacinto River, and it would flood periodically. Right. And then, years ago, flood control had to prevent it from flooding, and they channeled it. Ecosystem Investment Partners is trying to basically restore some of that hydrology so it naturally floods, and we're working with the county and wildlife agencies to do that. Its former life was a sod farm. Our property was a sod farm, so they grow grass out there and then harvested it. So it's been pretty heavily impacted over the years, but
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So are we still purchasing property, or have we already met the threshold? And then how many acres do we have?
The RCHCA has completed their acquisition, I believe, in 2006 was the last time we acquired property. We no longer need to acquire property. We manage or have influence over the management of 46,000 acres in Western Riverside. We are required to have 15,000 acres of occupied habitat somewhere within that 46,000 acres. So yes, we are done with our acquisition phase.
So 46,000.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right, seeing none, that's a receive and file. Moving on to 6F, a presentation by RCHCA Kurt Wilson regarding changes in the requirements for a remote public meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this item really doesn't have any new information for most of you, but I'm not sure how many of your agencies have taken a look at 2449, so we just want to make sure that everybody's aware of it. So as you're aware, California has open meeting laws, one for state agencies, the Bagley-Keene Act, and one for local government, the Brown Act. Legislature does not, none of them apply to the legislature, so Brown Act applies to us. We've got these rules, generally meeting in person, allowing the public to see what we do and go through that process. Those of you who've been at this for a while will be very familiar with the rules. You can meet in other locations with some onerous requirements, including public access, going through that process. During COVID, we ended up with AB 361, which allowed us to essentially pause all of those rules and allowed remote participation without having members of the public sort of sit next to you at your kitchen table to go through the process. Many people got very used to that and were able to take a lot of meetings from their cars and other things that made them very productive. That was predicated on a number of conditions which no longer exist, so that has gone away. So the old rules are still in place. Then on top of that, we have AB 2449, which some people view as sort of a replacement for AB 361. I'm not sure that's, I wouldn't take that opinion myself. It does provide for some remote options under some very onerous conditions. Essentially, if you meet a couple conditions which make it difficult for you to get there, either just cause or emergency circumstances, you have the ability to continue under the remote rules of going through that process. They're very strict in terms of how many times you can use them. In terms of the emergency circumstance, you actually have to have concurrence by a vote of the other members of the board. You go through that process there. So we are not recommending anything related to 2449, but just wanted to take a minute to let you know about it in case you hadn't already gotten to it. And finally, to note that the language in 2449 is not particularly clear. So what we have found is that most agency councils have taken slightly different interpretations. So in case any of you have some detailed questions, because we have Aaron Geddes who provides our legal counsel, we would recommend that you refer to Aaron for any specific requirements, because again, not every interpretation from each agency is exactly the same. Aaron is on the line with us, I believe, if you have any of those questions. But other than that, we just wanted to make you aware, and that'll conclude my report.
Thank you so much, Kurt. Any members of the public have any questions or comments?
No, ma'am.
All right. Any members of the board have any questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you so much for that clarification of the very convoluted AB 2449.
If I could, Chair, if I could, forgive the interruption. I just wanted to also add to that you can always just reach out to me individually and talk about it as well. And also, I just wanted to add that Dr. Wilson had included in the back of the agenda packet a fantastic little write-up that basically has frequently asked questions and answers on the AB 2449. And it's pretty helpful. Just wanted to raise that to everybody's attention.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Greatly appreciated. You were a voice from above, so just so you know. All right. Moving on to item 6G, a final presentation by RCHCA's Rihanna Fisher regarding the nonprofit status and activities of the Riverside Communities Partnership Project. Rihanna, take it away again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so I just wanted to provide a quick update. So the Riverside Communities Partnership Project, for those who don't know, is RCHCA's nonprofit vehicle. So in the past, we have used AmeriCorps teams and we'll do community projects with them. However, there is a problem with the AmeriCorps teams do require housing while they do the projects, which can last from sometimes 3 to 6 months. And there's usually about 16 people. The RCPP obtained its tax-exempt status as a nonprofit in October 2021. However, the program activities since then have been on hold due to the inability to find suitable housing for the AmeriCorps teams. Therefore, for fiscal year 23-24, there's no expected revenue or expenses anticipated for the RCPP as research is ongoing to find suitable housing. So it's a brief report, but that concludes it, and it says receive and file.
Thank you so much, Rihanna. Any members of the public have any questions or comments?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Any board members have any questions or comments? Seeing none. All right, we'll receive and file that. Thank you so much for your report. Report from the Executive Director, Dr. Kurt Wilson.
Thank you. Just two quick ones. One is to sort of acknowledge, the staff tells you a lot about the things they're doing, and they do it so often it seems sort of normal, like, hey, that must be what other people monitoring HCPs do. But I just wanted to note that, no, that's not the way it works for other places. Our little small but mighty team here is sort of on the cutting edge of things, so it is not normal to go out there and do these. On one hand, they're disposing of property. On the other hand, they're doing DNA sampling for a protected species. That's not normal, and it's not easy, even though they make it look easy. So just wanted to commend them on the work that they do. And for those of you particularly who are newer to this group, I would encourage you to reach out to Brian. If you're able to spend a few minutes to go out there when they're doing the trapping. It's a really eye-opening experience. Unfortunately, it's at night. So you have to make a little bit of an accommodation with your schedule, but they do a fantastic job, and it really helps to sort of highlight their passion for the work and what they do. The only other item is just a reminder, the statements of economic interest for the FPPC, the 700 forms, which were due back in April. We have not yet reached 100% compliance, so if you have not yet done so, please fill that form out. If you have questions, Janice can point you in the right direction. Or you can have your folks at your primary agency reach out to Janice. We're happy to help with anything we can do, but we are anxious to get to full compliance. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just, if you will, Janice, because I'm not saying you're doing it, but we all belong to so many committees, and they generally send out a blanket email to every reminder, and then I'm like, oh my God, I didn't do it? And I'm looking at, and I've done mine, so just, if you could just please go after the ones that haven't done it, so we're all not thinking we're violating the law. Thank you.
I guess a few of us need to be put on the hot spot. That's what you're saying, you went off. I got it completely. Yeah. All right, wonderful. If you could also send out an email to us as well when you are doing the night trapping. So that would be amazing to go participate in that. So thank you. All right, now asking the board, is there any future agenda items? Any requests for any future agenda items? Seeing none. All right, so nothing to add. And general announcements. Any board member have general announcements to make? Anybody would like to make an announcement? All right, we're a very quiet board today, aren't we? All right, our next meeting, Board of Directors meeting is scheduled for Thursday, May 11th at 11:30 a.m. and our location is to be determined. And our next RCPP meeting is scheduled for May 9th at 11:30 at the RCHCA board meeting. And I guess
Can you read those dates again?
Sorry, was I fast? Thursday, May 11th.
Yeah, that's what, today's May 11th.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So that's why I was like, wait a minute.
Oh, that is today. We're going so fast. So August 10th will be our next meeting at 11:30 and the location will be determined. If anybody would like to host it as well. Yeah, would somebody else like to host the meeting?
Janice, was my location suitable, or was just an issue of calendar dates?
Yeah, there was a conflict with items that your city had going on.
Well, I'm more than welcome to do it again if we can get it on the calendar.
I can communicate with your city clerk.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right, we're moving to adjournment. All those in favor?